The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
Hi, I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Wendy Sims-Moten, who's the Executive Director of First 5 Santa Barbara County. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here and for us to be able to share your story and the First 5 work that you're doing. Which is such important, integral work in the community. And we so appreciate your leadership. But before we go into First 5, I'd really love to be able to stop and pause and talk about you and your childhood and a bit of background where you were born and raised and grew up. Let's start there.
Okay, great, love to. I mean, I remember that fondly.
Great.
I was actually born and raised in Texas. Grew up in a very extended family where I had my great-grandparents, literally intimately knew them, who they were, and I think they're the grounding of who I am. I had that great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, and all the aunts and uncles to that. So wow. I was born and raised in Texas, and I went to school there until I left there at 20 years old with regards to that. But just to kind of step back a little bit in that childhood, so much of who I am is still there. And I call that my front porch, the family support that I have. Because my great-grandmother had a porch that said, if anything's all right, don't worry about it. If you don't have a problem, just come on the porch. Everything will be okay. And I grew up in a family that had expectations of me, had just dreams for me, and that helped me realize my dreams, want to realize my dreams. I grew up with teachers. I grew up with music, piano playing in the church. The church is also a huge part of who I am. That was the community. Back in Texas in the 60s, there still was some segregation. And so who did you find who you were as a young black girl? That was really formed really early in the church. And public speaking was, I found that in the church in terms of like that. So if you were 3 years old, you were going to get up and say, Merry Christmas, or God bless you, or something. So you already had that in front of a crowd who supported you, even if you got stage fright. It's okay, baby, come on, it's all right, go ahead. So had that type of nurturing, and certainly when you're growing up in a place where things aren't always equal, and how does that impact you as a young person growing up? But in Texas, I remember ready to get out because it was all like, brown, sand. Yes. West Texas State was brown, sand, everything like that. But I knew I needed to get out, go do something else, because I was always looking for something, because I was always encouraged, as all of my brothers and sisters and cousins were always encouraged to get outside yourself. Don't be afraid to do that, and because you've got everything within you. And that is just, I know that holds me and sustains me when I get, when things get challenging.
Wendy, I just love this description. It really paints just a colorful background of how you grew up and who you are and your values today. A couple of questions.
Sure.
Do you have, you said brothers and sisters, so you have siblings? That's one. And the second question is was it a small town or a really big town that you grew up in?
Yeah, I have two brothers. I'm in the middle, the only girl.
Okay.
Got to be the bossy one. Still am. Get to tell them. But I actually have an older brother and a younger brother, and the two siblings that I have, and lots of cousins. Boy cousins. There was only one other girl cousin, so there's 7 of us boys and then only 2 girls. So it got to be really tough in terms of dealing with those types of things. And then it was a small town. It was La Mesa, Texas, about 6 hours this side of Dallas, Texas. So it's a small town. It was small. It was, as you got to go and see the world a little bit, I got to travel a little bit, and so I knew there's other things I want to see and do. Yeah, I always wanted to do that.
Right, and you were encouraged to actually spread your wings, it sounds like, from all different aspects of your family and friends.
And growing up there, again, there weren't many, as a teenager, there weren't many opportunities to get summer jobs, and so there were limitations as to jobs that were available to particularly children of color. And so I know and I understand the hard work it took. I mean, there are days, I know, long days in the cotton field, and I don't forget that for 1 minute. I know that it also said that this is not want to be my life. So what do I need to do? And education was that pathway to do that, because we've always been taught, in our family, that education is the way to your dreams, the pathway. You've got to work hard. And so all of those things are still there. And I know some of the struggles. And I appreciate them now, not necessarily then, but I certainly do that.
Sure. What you not only saw, but what you experienced. You talked about segregation being still part of life, and when you were a child and growing up, and I'm sure that equity-minded focus is still part of who you are. I mean, it clearly is part of who you are, not only as an executive director of First Five and really a shepherd and leader for children, but for families, and also the school district with which you serve, which we'll talk about too.
Sure.
Great, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about college, because you went to college in Texas and then you came out to California. So the question is, what did you study in college, and then what made you come out to California?
Well, I studied communications. I'm always wanting to talk, so I maybe need to be more formal about how I talk. So it was just an easy, natural place for me to be. So I started out at West Texas State. We were buffaloes. That was our mascot. I went there for about a year, and then just so happened that I had a crazy boyfriend that I thought, this is not the life for me, got to move on. So at 20, I packed my car. My great uncle, who lives out here now, still in California, he was there for Christmas holiday. I packed my car and I followed him out here to California.
I love it.
And I have not looked back. I was a little homesick, so I was still free and hadn't found a job or anything. So I would do some midnight, flights out to LA to Texas and back and forth, but really have not looked back.
Is that right? And you've loved it ever since being in California?
I've loved it ever since. I mean, it's almost like I was supposed to be here, because you're able to just express and be so much free. And there's still those moments that it's not equitable, but not in the sense at the level that it was that I grew up, but able to voice, and you have a community and much more progressive moving forward of really thinking everyone deserves a chance, and how do we together make that happen?
Got it.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious what some of your professional aspirations were as you were growing up, because you had such a supportive family, extended family. You had the porch. You could talk about any issue.
Yeah.
Yet you talk about cotton fields. You talk about probably all kinds of different professions that you could have chosen. What was of interest to you? What was your aspiration?
I had three. Actually wanted to be a teacher, and I think some senses I probably am that, not necessarily in the school setting. Wanted to be a lawyer. That was short-lived in terms of that. And I wanted to be a nurse to a certain degree, but I wanted to be that because my mother was just great at that. That's who she was, and how she spoke with people, how she handled her patients, how she nurtured them. And so that piece of that, I thought, that's good. But when you start with the needles and all that thing, no, I'll leave that to those. I'll just take the gracious and how you're working with folks into my next career. And so those were kind of all of those things that led me to here. And the job I found here was banking. That was the most open job, and who knew, because I did not like math in school. I didn't like it, but I thought, how do I land this? And I was there, for about 12 years, and the bank closed, and that's how I ended up at the county.
Okay. Well, before we go to the county, because I really want to talk about that work that you've had started and now are continuing to do, and in fact lead. But as I'm so curious, as a banker, were you like a teller? Were you leadership in the bank? What were some of the positions?
Yeah, I've always wanted to lead. Just to go back to the teaching piece, I was always teaching my brothers. I had them in class, and making sure that, and they were always tardy to my class. But anyway, so teaching was there. And so, as the bank, I started out as a teller, learning how to do those things. And, you always seen the tellers that what I thought were in high heels and cute things. I actually worked an 8-hour day in heels. I knew the reality was not what I was looking at in terms of those pieces. Like, you don't stand for 8 hours at a line in high heels. So sometimes you have to experience different things to really truly understand what they mean. But I started out as a teller. I always wanted to be a lead teller. It was always my goal to lead. And so I ended up being an operations supervisor. And then for a short time while the bank manager was on maternity leave, I was the assistant manager for La Cumbre Savings Bank, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know for a variety of reasons that the bank had to close.
Right.
So you were looking for something else, and you decided to take a position position at the county of Santa Barbara. Yeah. And what was that position?
It was an account clerk, again, in math. What is that?
What is that?
It led me there, and it had great experience. I ended up working at General Services, so I got to know on the ground what services are being provided. Internal services, departments that provide services to other departments. So part of General Services, I worked with underground storage tanks at the gas station, what it took to clean them up. I had to, had the opportunity to work at the state level. So it really gave me an opportunity to work at all different levels of government, even being an account clerk. And I think it's important, even during the entry level, when you're able to work with other higher levels, it just prepares you for that pathway to the leadership pieces that you have to work.
So true, so true. Knowing all of the different aspects of leadership, including the starting level and entry level at a position, is really very helpful in terms of a perspective, which then brings us today. So you're the Executive Director of First 5 Santa Barbara County. Bit of a new position to you, though you are not new to First 5. So so let's go back to where you started with First 5, and then how did you get to where you are today in terms of being the Executive Director?
I was in General Services at the point, and you can be on a list. It's called a departmental assistant. You can apply for various positions, so you get on a list, and as county departments need those positions, you're already there, you're certified, and then you go for the interview if such the case. And about a month before I actually interviewed for First 5, although I didn't know what department it was at the time, I had to leave and take a break because my mother was, critically ill, and so I was there for about a month. And then by the time I came back, I had this letter that said there's an opening, there's an interview coming up, and it's tomorrow. I just got in that Saturday, but I just want to say too that there's so many pieces of being a part of this journey that I was new pretty much to this county, and I hadn't built up the sick time that I needed to be away, and the county employees were so generous. So I knew I was in a good place, and I knew I was in a good space, and so it led to, again, that was another journey through the pathway, and so I took the position. I applied for the position. I was chosen for that. And I actually hired Pat Wheatley because I was there. And so I said, I was there since the first paperclip. They kind of led me there. So I started out as an departmental assistant because that was what was needed. It was myself. And then about 2 weeks later, Pat Wheatley, the previous executive director, she was hired. And we had a really good relationship, and I always talk about relationships. They're very, very important to me, how you're treating people, how you formulate relationships, because she came in with someone that was already hired, but someone who I'd worked with previously said, well, you're getting one of the best employees. And I knew that's so important about relationships and how you treat people, in terms of that, because it can serve you later on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. That's great. And so you had several positions, it sounds like. I know you were in the financial department of First 5. And how long did you serve in that capacity?
I actually was kind of doing that, because we were within the county, so there was a shared piece with the auditor controller, so there are shared duties that they need to do that as one person I couldn't do, and actually very grateful the pieces that they do. So learning those pieces, and so a lot initially as a new program, a lot of it was dependent upon the accounts payable, the internal audit control pieces, and so that was there. And so as I was learning that position, I was also learning to be programmatic, understand programs, and really be able to balance the financial side to the programmatic side. So I was well-rounded in that because it was just Pat and myself until we hired a program manager, if you will. Probably about 6 months in, we realized we're going to need some help with this because we did strategic planning. We had to do that in order to bring down the funds. So I was out there getting out into the community. That was probably my first experience of going all over this county. We had 11 meetings in like 10 days, and we were from here to Cuyama. So a lot of different aspects of the county that I wouldn't have otherwise been experienced to or been exposed to.
Right. Yeah. So how many years have you been in with First 5? Because this is your now first official year as executive director.
Yes, first official year. Actually, about a month. In a week, it'll be a full month. I've actually been with the county 22 years. 22 years. Yeah. And so with the 19 years with First 5.
Wonderful.
Literally. And we're in our 20th year of Prop 10 being, voted in 1998, so in 20 years.
I think all of what you just shared, everything that you just shared, including your background in growing up in Texas and the porch and all of that with your experiences at the county really helps to describe to viewers today who might not have known you before, why you were the unanimous choice of all who interviewed you to be the executive director. A full month in, and already you see how successful you are. So let's talk about First Five. Not everybody knows what First Five's mission is and what it is meant to do, its intent. So can you share that with us?
Sure. As I said, 20 years ago, it was enacted by the voters that increased 50 cents tax on tobacco products because secondhand smoke was the issue at that point, and how its effects on young children and pregnant teens and pregnant mothers. And so there was this movement to address that, and then also brains research about how the early development is such a critical time, and so there was this dedicated funding that came about, and so 58 counties, you collect all of the dollars that are there, and it's divided on 58 counties based on their birth rate, and then that's 80% of the dollars collected, and then the remaining 20% is at the state level, because there's also a state commission. And each individual county, they have they address their needs locally, so guided by some firm, some guidelines and boundaries for that. And the First Five mission is to ensure that we support kindergarten ready school readiness. And how do we do that? Making sure that families are strong and they're healthy, because that's an integral part of children being ready for anything, ready for the world, ready for entering kindergarten, and to also to enhance the availability and access to high quality childcare and preschool spaces. So that's our main mission in doing that, and everything that we're funding, that we're investing in, is really focusing on those early years, how critical they are, and it's a short time when you can really take full advantage of that.
That's great. You really spoke about that so eloquently, and if I just summed it up in a nugget, it's really around, if I may, support for birth to 5, birth to kindergarten readiness, and all of the healthy aspects in between.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so First Five Santa Barbara County, as you said, all the 58 counties have an umbrella at the state, but each county can offer what they provide individually. Right. So Santa Barbara County has its own sort of set of mission, its mission, and also set of programs. Right. And so there are some areas that I know First Five has said, these are critical areas for us. And let's go through each of them. Sure. I'll just name them, and you can talk about each of those aspects, and then however much more you'd like to share. Sure. But one of the areas, the first area, is family support. What does that mean for First Five, family support?
That families are getting their support and getting parenting support if they need it, and understanding that they're their child's first and most important teacher, how we do that, and how important that family support is, and how do we strengthen those families to be able to do that in ways of knowing how your child is developing, how that I can be more, not necessarily effective, but for lack of a better word, as a parent, what tools can I do? And that's a strong sense, and that actually impacts, kindergarten readiness, how strong that family foundation is, and if they're coming home from school, what foundation do they have to be able to do that? So that's a huge focus on family support, because it's the central piece, and then the rest kind of goes out from there.
Right, and we hear on the radio there'll be ads for First Five and singing and reading, right, and all of that, and that's probably part of that focus for parents and guardians to support their children at home.
Yeah, I think people may have the misconception that it all has to be in a center-based place, or it always has to be in a family child care center, but those are broad things that you can do every day. Even folks that have family, friends, and neighbors families who can't afford to either be in a center base or even in a family child care center, so they may be taken care of by relatives, and so you can do talk, read, or sing, and it doesn't cost anything. And I think that just getting that broader message out, and you can use it doing laundry or just hanging out. You don't have to have a tune or anything like that. It's just singing and engaging the brain.
Great.
Yeah.
So one area is family support, which we just discussed. Another one is early care and education. So what about that?
Yeah, we focus on increasing the spaces. We know that's a critical need here in terms of the number of spaces that are available, primarily in the infant structure, but we focus on how can we increase the high quality of it, because we know that children that are in high quality at preschool spaces and child care spaces, they come out ready, even more ready for kindergarten, because you're focusing on their developmental needs. So that's a lot of focus on where we're doing those pieces. And previously we kind of drilled down to that's the main focus, but it also focuses on those who are providing the care. We used to have a workforce development. How do we help them go back to school and increase their education?
Got it. Yeah. So that early care and education could be maybe preschool, could be nursery schools, could be daycares, and infant care.
Yes, absolutely.
And the support for not only the families who utilize it, but those who provide it.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And the third area is communication. So talk about that. That's a big area for you.
It is a big area, and it is the area that we can capture the most parents, because when you're dealing with some limited dollars, you have to focus usually on those who have the highest need, and so you want to be able to do that and focus on those pieces. Whereas there are parents that need various needs. They don't need the intensive need. The communication allows us to target out, send out messages in many different ways through our Facebook, through ads, through books that we do, through community events that happen. And so the communication piece is that through the texting, you can get, oh, my child's not developing, or who to call, and it gives you a resource to be able to go to and to access. And you can, a small amount of money or a small investment there goes a long, long way.
That's right.
Because you're not having to do the intensive level of services that usually will cost a little bit more. But it allows us to reach all the parents in many different ways.
Got it.
Yeah.
And the fourth big area is capacity building. So say a little bit about that. Who is it targeted towards?
It's targeted for, a couple things, system-wide changes that we can make too. So one of the things with Proposition is we look at systematic things that maybe perhaps we can change that can help, children and families be stronger. And so we look at, for instance, I'll say a prime example, we used to do a lot of dental care. It was a huge need. There were a lot of young folks with dental caries, and it's a preventable piece. And so we looked at it, is there a system-wide approach that we could take to address that? And so through those system-wide approaches, then you're able to bring folks of different aspects that are working on the same thing. And so we've gone from doing a lot of dental carie things to now more prevention. And so you've seen that need to go down, considerably. And we're able to have those dollars stretch a little bit more about education and preventing the capacity. So, and also the capacity building are small grants that kind of go out that may be developing folks who are in the programs, for family advocates who are there. It's small leadership, building leadership within the community. So depending, they're small investments, but they're making a broad, large impact in terms of, and you're building the capacity in the community as well, because you're doing direct service with that small amount and bringing folks together. It allows you to convene at different areas as well.
That's great. Thanks for going over those 4 areas. Sure. I know First Five does so much beyond that. We just couldn't list them all, but those were some big areas. Right. But just zooming out a little bit on First Five, you said something just a moment ago around community impact. And I'm going to couple it with the fact that First Five is Santa Barbara County. It's we have a large county. It's a wonderfully diverse one.
It is.
Talk about what you think about around community impact and First Five. Right. Maybe what you've seen it do, or what you might see it do in the future.
Right. I think, when the first Proposition 10 first kind of came out, it was like, that's just childcare in terms of the piece. And certainly we did our share of, improving playgrounds and different things, and just learning our way and doing an assessment of needs. But it has a far-reaching community impact, because those early years so much impact the later years. And so when we're able to bring the community together to drill down to what it really means about early development, early care, because it's prevention, and those dollars are well spent, because you see people developing, you're understanding each other as a community, because the things that we do early, whether it's child care or prevention things, it makes a strong impact on this community, and it's crucial. And so one of my things that I feel that we shouldn't be so siloed in that it's only early care, but we could be at many different tables and talk about prevention and early care, particularly so if it's Department of Social Services, if it's probation, folks that are entering that system. How can we make a community impact in those areas that are not traditionally, coming together with First Five or early care communities? Those were children at some point. So how can we do and look at that, and parents that may be going, when they're exiting those systems, how can we support them? Some of them are parents. How can we support them in that way, being at that table? So the community impact, I think, is an opportunity to really show this community that how much stronger it could be, as we look at how we can start things, and knowing that in the end, the early care really impacts the later ends. So,
That's really great. Thank you for that. I want to turn the corner for just a minute and touch on your service as a board member of Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Trustees. It's been, I think, 2 years approximately since you've served, or that's how long? Yes. Okay, great. And first of all, thank you for your service and your leadership there on the board. And talk a little bit about why you wanted to run for that board seat, and also the intersection between serving there and your role on First Five.
Right. I had time, and it takes a lot of time and energy and effort to be there, to really be engaged at the school board level, and understanding that 15,000 students or so that are in this district. But my primary reason and my why is because I know how important education was in my life, and I know how it was such a driving force, because so many times you hear how education is the pathway to your dreams. It's the golden key that unlocks the door to freedom, all of those things. But I wanted to also run because I wanted to be that voice of equity, and how important it is for all students to feel a part of it, not isolated from it, engaged in it. And I also wanted to be a partner in the success of our children. This is one section in our community that is important into the success of our children. And I thought, I'm right there. I appreciate that. I knew how I was as a student. I had a brief stint in Missouri, and I saw when there were separations even of expectations. And so just to bring that voice and to hear other sides, because I think when you're able to listen and hear things, then you can come together, because you have a common goal of ensuring that our students are safe, they're engaged, and that they are a partner in their success. And how do we come together and do that? So it's really about that driving force, that it really is still the pathway to your dreams. We just have to ensure that they feel engaged in it, and we have to appreciate the hard work that our teachers do, and the administrators do in terms of that. And so how do we work together to make sure that the common goal that we're all there for is actually going to be successful in their pathway?
Excellent, thank you. And the intersection with your service on the board with being the executive director of First Five must be very strong. It's very powerful.
Right.
Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Sure. I get the opportunity when we're talking about a strategy that's happening, and particularly in this case where social, emotional, and mental health is a huge need, and that we're addressing, in the community, and we're addressing it certainly in the district. As I said, well, don't forget about the little ones. I think that they're young and they'll be okay. No, but they really have needs too, and so we focus on that. And so we are making sure that the early care and thought is in that process. It is the voice in that conversation, and I want it to be the voice whether I'm at that table or not. That to think, like, as we're making decisions about our teenagers and our tweenagers, where can we start back to where some of the issues that we're addressing now, if we start early and have the conversations with the early care and the community, that we'll have some of those things taken care of, or how to address them a little bit more. So as long as I continue, and I will continue to just impart that voice, because I think you do it long enough, then it becomes a system change. Right. That I have there used to be what they call a water cooler, or a gathering of voices, recently coming up. Actually, it's going to be coming up, where it used to be just about K through 12. But the understanding that we really need to start a little bit earlier, because those times we can really get at that early developing times in minds really impacts how they get to kindergarten, how ready they are. And I think the conversation with the early care community is critical, because not only are we preparing the kids to be ready, the schools have to be ready as well. And so I think those intersect often. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Wendy. I can't believe the time has already gone by.
We were just talking.
We were just starting. In fact, we are just starting.
Yes, we
and
are.
I think we'll have to continue and just promise to continue our dialogue and share it with the community for sure. Because I think the viewers who are watching today not only got a chance to get to know you a little bit better and First Five, but to know the leader behind First Five. And I think what you bring, your experiences, your passion, the family connectedness that you were brought up with, you really bring that forward in your leadership, not only on First Five, but actually as somebody who's supporting K through 12 or TK to 12 education as a school board member. I want to thank you so much for your not only time today, but the work that you do each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Local Leaders.